What's up, you guys? Welcome to my channel. My name is David J. Kelly, and today we're going to be talking about something everybody needs to be eating regardless of your goals, but especially if you want to build muscle, and that is protein, and what are the best sources to eat to build that muscle tissue. So without further delay, let's dive right on into it. Eating protein is not only essential for life-sustaining function, it is actually completely essential to build muscle. And the reason for that is because we need the amino acids that are in proteins to be used for muscle protein synthesis to repair and grow back that muscle tissue that we've trained and we spent so much time breaking down in the gym, right? So protein is where we're gonna get that from. We need the amino acids to start that process to build the muscle tissue. So when it comes to consuming protein, we want to have things that are going to facilitate the best muscle protein synthesis. So what are the best sources of protein to do this? Well, I'm going to break this down into a few categories. The first category I want to talk about is lean proteins. So what are lean proteins? Well, they're exactly how they sound. When we think of lean, we think of not having as much fat, right? There are fattier cuts of meat and fattier protein sources that exist that are, in fact, very good for you. But we're going to talk about lean proteins right now. So lean proteins are going to be things like the typical chicken, right? Chicken breast, lean turkey breast, shrimp, whitefish such as like cod, halibut. You can do things like tuna. There's a lot of lean protein sources that exist out there. Now, in my opinion, lean protein sources are superior, and they are the ones I utilize the most in my diet as well as my clients' diets. And the reason for that is because a lot of fattier cuts of meat or fish have fat in them that are somewhat good for you, but we don't want to be having tons of saturated fat in our diet, which is for the most part what is in things like ground beef and ground bison. We want to be getting our fat sources from other fat sources that are healthier for us, like nuts, avocados, olive oils, things like that. That's a whole different video topic, but lean proteins give us the best ability to take in strictly protein, right? If I'm eating chicken, I can have leaner cuts of chicken. I don't need to worry about the extra fat content or carbohydrate content in that. I can get those carbs and fats from other sources in my diet that are going to be much healthier and digest better for me. So I like to comprise the most of my nutritional intake as well as my clients' intake from lean protein sources, and that's what you should do as well. Regardless of whether you are somebody who does eat meat or does not eat meat, maybe you're vegetarian, vegan, it really doesn't matter. You want to consume most of your protein intake from lean protein sources. So I would typically try to consume about 80% of your protein from things like that. Now, the next source of proteins I want to talk about are going to be the fattier protein cuts of meat, fish, and things of that nature. I already mentioned one of those is eggs, right? Whole eggs. Whole eggs are actually very good for you, despite what you've been told. The cholesterol in eggs, it's not going, if you're relying on somebody telling you that eating whole eggs is going to ruin your cholesterol, they don't know what they're talking about. So please don't listen to people like that. Whole eggs have a lot of really good micronutrients in them that are very good for you and actually can help lower your cholesterol. So that's a very bad myth. But another really good source of fattier cuts of meat, fattier proteins would be things like ground beef, 93.7, something like that, ground turkey 93.7, but also ground beef 90.10s, totally fine, as well as salmon, which salmon is probably my favorite out of this group because it is so rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which is so good for you in terms of, reducing inflammation in the body, lowering your cholesterol, and getting in those good dietary fats that we do want, versus ground beef does have some saturated fat that we don't necessarily want. It's not terrible for you, but we do want more of the omega-3 fatty acid group. And that's why fish oil, for example, is such a popular supplement, because most people are not getting enough omega-3s in their diet. But eating salmon daily or pretty often is one way of doing that. So I like to have these scattered in my diet. I typically have 1 to 2 meals of these a day, right? And some meals I will, like in my first meal or my clients' first meals, I do throw in some whole eggs, and then later in the day I will give them a fattier cut of meat such as a steak or salmon. Ground beef, ground bison is another great one, and it's good to vary the sources of these fattier cuts of meat as well as the lean proteins. And the reason for this is because they all have a little bit of a different micronutrient profile. So ground beef, for example, versus ground bison, are going to have a little bit of a different amino acid profile, a little bit of a different micronutrient profile. So it's good to vary which ones you're taking in because they're going to give you a different array of those micronutrients. And so this brings us to our third and last group that I want to talk about. And these would be things that are dairy-based, supplemental-based, and miscellaneous. So we'll put them in that column. And these would be things like vegan protein sources such as tofu, for example. There's a few other ones. I'm not as well versed on those, but a lot of vegan source proteins are good, and they can be even implemented into a meat eater's diet as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It kind of gives, again, that array, that spectrum of micronutrients and amino acid profiles, which again, we're eating protein for the amino acids for the most part. This is also going to include things like Greek yogurt and protein powders, right? Vegan protein powders, whey protein powders, casein protein powders, protein blends, that whole spectrum right there. And these are good to put in the diet in sparse amounts, in my opinion. You don't want to be having the majority of your protein intake coming from Greek yogurt or any dairy protein source. And the main reason for that is because typically we will see with a lot of people that dairy will really affect their digestive system a lot when they're having too much of it. Even people that are not lactose intolerant, most people on average are not going to really deal well with having protein coming from dairy 6 times a day, right? Some people can handle it once a day, twice a day. At most, on average, in my clients as well as myself, I do see that to be pretty typical. I can handle it a little bit more frequently than the average person, but I really try to not have it as much like that. And the same is going to be true with protein powders. We don't want to have the bulk of our protein intake coming from protein powders. Protein powders are really good for supplemental meals and supplemental getting your protein intake to where it needs to be. We don't want to rely on protein powders to get the bulk of our protein from them. And the main reason for that is that they're just not as micronutrient dense. Other lean protein sources as well as fattier cuts of meat are going to have more micronutrients in them. So you want to get the bulk of your protein intake from those lean proteins, as I said, and the fattier cuts of meat. And then these things like Greek yogurt or protein powders should kind of round out the edges and get you to that total protein intake that you need. So that is going to do it for today's video. I hope this helps you solve the protein intake goals that you need. If you need further guidance on how to map out your nutrition daily intake, or you have specific goals you're looking to achieve, I do offer one-on-one coaching for both competitors in the bodybuilding space as well as lifestyle people that just want to put on some muscle, lose some weight, or anything in between. I am a certified nutritionist and I love to help people with this. So please reach out to me. There's a link in the description below. But thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. I hope that you guys got a lot out of it. I had fun making it. Make sure you like and are subscribed to the channel because I'll be having a lot more videos just like this one.